All right, guys, so I've been getting a lot of comments saying that I spend a lot of time in my display section on my phones, monitors. I've been hearing a lot of comments saying that I should start reviewing some dedicated monitors. And just around that time, Titan Army, which I've never heard of them. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of them before. They reached out to me and sent me this product for review. So no money exchange hands, no editorial input from them. So my opinions are my opinions. When they sent this to me, I was quite intrigued. So there's some really good specs at the price. So we're looking at least on Amazon right now. We're still in that holiday season right now. So I don't know how long these prices will last. But as of right now, you can get this for $250 with a coupon on Amazon right now. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to have links to buy in the description and a code to get $12 off. I mean, I don't benefit by you using these links, but I guess it helps the company know that I sent you. So let's get into the specs of this thing. So it is a 27-inch QHD, 180 hertz IPS display, fairly high color volume, and I'll show you that when I get into my measurements. And it works pretty good, so let's just get right into it. So let's just start off with the build and the design. So, I mean, it is pretty much all plastic, just as most monitors I've tested. Some of the crazy OLEDs I've tested had like an aluminum back panel, etc. This is just all plastic. I mean, the legs on the stand is made out of metal, though, so that's nice and secure. It's not so much of a knock, though. There's some $2,500 monitors that I review, sometimes $1,000 monitors that are still all made out of plastic as well too. I will say though, with this, since this monitor isn't that heavy, I kind of wish it didn't have those legs sticking out. At a monitor this size, I was hoping to have a more of a flush stand if you plan on using that, but if you wanted to, this is VESA mountable. But the way it's designed, it might be a little bit difficult to get your VESA mount in there, so just be aware of that. The back is fairly solid, not overly thick or chunky or anything. It looks fairly modern and sophisticated, and you also get some RGB. You get a red light at the back, and at the bottom it's blue, and at nighttime it glows wonderfully well against a back wall, much better than some of the more expensive Samsung monitors I've been using. When those are on, like, you can't even tell that there's RGB on those, so I'm really happy about that. And since we're at the back, let's spend some time looking at the ports. And you know what, I've been asking for this for years. Like, I've reviewed like $1,500 monitors, and even my G9 57-inch monitor, which I pay like $2,500 for, that only has one display port. This $250 monitor is able to give me two display ports. That's something I've always wanted because I have two devices. I have my work laptop and my gaming laptop, and I don't like having to use HDMI. I just prefer DisplayPort. But then on top of that, you also get two HDMI ports. So I'm really happy with the port selection. It would have been nice if there were some USB inputs, but again, at this price point, I'm not going to really fault them too much for that. And now, so when we come around to the front, the bezels are relatively slim too. Not bad. The only thing is there's a bit of a bottom bezel, and you're greeted with that green Titan Army logo, which, I mean, it's out there for sure. And at the bottom, there's a blue light, and that's where the menu controls are. And let's talk about the menu controls for a little bit. At first, I was about to give this OSD, this on-screen display, like a really, really bad score because it was just really frustrating to use in terms of the button layout and the design and how the buttons work. But then after having this thing for about like 3 weeks, all of a sudden one day muscle memory clicked and I was able to get into it. So I mean, sometimes I gotta remember when I'm reviewing things, my review period might only be like 3 weeks, 4 weeks max, but this video is intended for someone to buy this monitor and keep it for years and years and years. So at the end of the day, this OSD is fine. And honestly, it's like a set and forget it kind of thing. There's not much different settings you need to juggle back and forth as you will with some of the more creative type monitors. But I mean, but you can use this for creativity purposes. And when I get to the display section, you'll see what I'm talking about. But overall, I mean, solid marks for the OSD. It has a lot of functions, but it's just not the most intuitive in terms of its layout and what the actual buttons do. So now let's start talking about this panel itself. It is an IPS display with no sort of adaptive backlighting technology. There's no fully array local dimming. It's not a mini LED panel. I mean, obviously at $250, you're just not getting that in 2023 in terms of the technology available. Those monitors, including OLED, are more than double that. But for what you're getting, it is a solid IPS panel. Let me start off with the cons. There is some backlight bleed. I've noticed in the top corner, top left corner, top right corner, and a little bit at the bottom. So as you can see here, I will say though that, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not a deal breaker for me. And this is coming from someone who's incredibly picky about backlight bleed. I mean, just a year or two ago, or even this year, a lot of ROG laptops have backlight bleed in it. And some of those laptops could go up to like $2,500. So we're not at the point where we're completely eliminating backlight bleed. If you are sensitive to that, make sure you just order it from somewhere like Amazon where you could do exchanges and returns until you get a good copy in. I'm like, after using this for like about 3 weeks, I've been spending almost every night with this monitor after work, just playing games and just surfing the web and you know, things like that. And I haven't had any issues with the backlight bleed, but I feel like I just got to mention it. So next thing we got to talk about is the contrast ratio. That's the difference between the brightest part of a screen and the darkest part of the screen. So because this is an IPS panel and it doesn't have any of that variable backlighting technology in the form of mini LEDs or a fully array local dimming zone, I mean, I was able to measure 1300 to 1, 1320 to be exact. For a native panel, especially IPS, that is actually fairly good. Usually IPS panels would measure around anywhere between 500 to 1 to 1,000 to 1, especially if you have an LG IPS display that came out maybe like 3-4 years ago. Their technology has gotten better, and I'm not sure who makes the panel for this product. I wasn't able to determine that, but regardless, the contrast ratio is actually surprisingly good for it being a native contrast ratio. So then, and then brightness is only 330 to 1. So it's not the brightest display, but I mean, again, I found it to be very suitable for daylight viewing. It does have a matte coating on it. So some people love it, some people don't. I think for a panel that is around 330 nits, I think the matte display is acceptable. But because the native contrast ratio is so high, that 331 nits didn't really seem that dim to me, honestly. And especially if you're in a darker room, you dim the lights, close the shades, you're going to be in for a treat. So now let's talk about the color. You're getting 100% of sRGB, 89% of Adobe RGB, and 93% of DCI-P3. So that is really, really, really good numbers at this price point. Once you start talking about 90% of DCI-P3 and up, that's when you start to see richer colors and more vibrant details and better gradients, etc. I mean, at the end of the day, this is still an 8-bit panel. At least you're able to get the higher color gamut of DCI-P3, and it does look good. The colors do pop, and it is enjoyable to look at. But none of that matters if it's not accurate out of the gate. And guys, look at this. The Delta E on this monitor is almost perfect, 0.75. So it's a very, very color accurate screen. So when you're playing your favorite AAA titles, it'll look as the game developers intended. And if you plan on doing any type of color critical work on this, you'll be able to. And honestly, I didn't run any of these measurements until last night when I knew I was going to be talking about this monitor today. So when I saw it, when I ran these measurements, I wasn't surprised by the color. That I was able to immediately identify. I knew it was accurate just because I look at colors all day long between, you know, making these videos and doing photography on the side. Like my eyes got really attuned to knowing when colors are accurate or not. But the brightness I was surprised by. Subjectively, the display looked a lot brighter than it actually is. And I think that's, again, because of the contrast ratio. But coming back to the contrast ratio, though, I don't want to oversell it. At the end of the day, 1300 to 1 isn't perfect blacks. You're still going to see dark grays where black should be. But compared to other IPS displays I've used in the past, even back in the day when I used to buy like $700-800 LG IPS panels, this still looks and performs better, except for maybe that backlight bleed, which I did mention. And also I did run a uniformity test, and as you can see here, the backlight bleed is evident, and it is showing up in my measurements. So the worst I've tested was on the top corner, which was a 4.8 delta E. I'm just going to throw those measurements up if you want to take a look at them, but it's proving that this monitor does not have perfect uniformity. So now let's talk about gaming on this thing. The first thing I noticed was the input latency was really, really low. I still don't have a way to objectively measure latency, but I mean, I've been using so many displays, so much laptops, so much monitors. That's one thing I'm able to pick up on really quickly. And I started playing some Overwatch too, and I was doing just as good or bad, if you want to say, as I would with any other monitor. I felt the latency was very, very low. The response time, I mean, I know they advertise a 1 millisecond, but I didn't really pick up on that. So in Overwatch, I played as Reaper, and he uses a shotgun. So with shotgun play, you have to be really up close. So having a good response time, so you're not seeing ghosting and such, I was able to detect a good amount of ghosting, but that's just me comparing it to the OLED monitors I've had or to the Samsung G9 57-inch VA panel, which I know typically in the past VA panels didn't have good response time, but Samsung's been working their magic, and that the response time on that is really good. Regardless, I feel like if you're an ultra competitive gamer, especially if you're playing up close and close combat, this might not be 100% perfect for you, but also at the same time, I don't know what other monitor at $250 would perform better at this. And then, I just played some single player games. I played some Resident Evil 4 remake, the Horizon Zero Dawn, which someday I'm finally gonna beat. And it was great. The colors are rich and amazing. The picture is nice and sharp at QHD. 180 hertz is really awesome to have. It's just been a really good monitor. And I would say, like, to really get something substantially better than this, you're gonna have to spend like another $200 to maybe even another $400 to get something that's appreciably better than what this monitor offers. So, I mean, with that being said, like at $250, I'm really happy that I reviewed this, and I think it's obviously, and I would say obviously, if you're in the market for a monitor, add this to your list of potential monitors to buy. I really like this one, and I'm happy that Titan Army sent this over to me to review. I've never heard of the brand before, and honestly, if they didn't send this to me, I would have never known about it. So I'm happy that they did. But even though they sent it to me, all these opinions are my own, etc. I wouldn't make a video and tell you to buy something if I didn't actually like it myself. You guys be willing to take my advice is more important than any brand sending me stuff would ever do. So with that being said, if you guys have any questions, leave me some comments and I'll get to them. So, all right, guys, thanks a lot. Bye.